Hmm.
There we go. That's good. And I'm just making sure I've got my backup running as well. See, I'm not used to you rock stars being early. I'm normally waiting a few
Yeah, I
minutes.
was just getting a little like I just I'm usually punctual, but fortunately, because you guys were just simple Zoom, everything worked well. Last night I had to copy and paste something, and it was Chrome and not Safari, and I was having all these issues. So I just thought, the last thing I need is a little more stress right before I go,
Hmm.
on to an interview. So I just figured, let me log on a few minutes early and let's get started. That's all.
Absolutely. Makes sense.
I
Okay, right.
didn't wait long for you. Don't worry.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't.
I know, holding you up. I'm sorry. Um, good
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Right, I'll get us kicked off then with a quick introduction then. Here we go.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Paul from Backstage Past Rock News, and I'm delighted to be joined on the line by a legendary guitarist, Bruce Kulick. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. And I know you're calling me from a very far away place compared to Las Vegas, where I am. But music brings everybody together, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Vegas, Loch Ness Monster. It's almost the same thing,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Just
Yes.
about the same, yeah.
Crazy monsters, that's it. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. We've got loads to chat about. Your career is incredible and you've got some great stories, so I'm looking forward to hearing them. But I want to
Sure.
start with Meatloaf, because this is one that really intrigues me. Obviously, Bat Out of Hell was a massive album, and you and your brother Bob toured with that album, didn't you, with Meatloaf, and
Yep.
went around the world with it. I mean, how did you get involved with that to start with? And what was it like touring on such a monster album?
Yeah, I mean, believe me, growing up in New York had its advantages, certainly, with back then, the word was out looking for guitar players. My brother, being 4 years older than me, was a bit more ahead of the game career-wise. Okay. So it was very easy for him to hear about things like that. And the fact that they were looking for two guitar players, kind of like that Hunter Wagner thing that Lou Reed used and Alice Cooper used, Steve Hunter, Dick Wagner, tremendous guitar players. And Bob knew Dick Wagner and did a little work out actually with Alice Cooper, ironically enough, for when Steve went off to something. Anyway, they were looking for a double, two guitar players, and we just happened to fit the bill. The record was very unusual when we heard it. Todd Rundgren I loved. Okay, so for me, there was this. For me, the Todd's riffs were like an Eric Clapton and other players that I admired, and I knew that he put his stamp on that record, quite a bit. And my brother's not the guy to study and dissect a solo and then recreate it. He was his own. Sometimes I was envious of that, but then again, I used to like to build things. So when I listened to guitar players, I wanted to deconstruct. What do they do here? How do you do that? So it was really valuable for Meatloaf and the band and the management to know. Well, when there was important Todd Rundgren riffs, I had it covered,
Yeah.
and my brother had all the attitude and pizzazz, and the two of us worked off each other like that. And now we're on tour, starting off very rocky, to be honest. It didn't go well in the very, very beginning. People were like, 300-pound, sweating guy in a tuxedo with this kind of strange piano player, 9 people on stage. We got booed off the stage when we were opening for Cheap Trick. But somehow, by the time, in a short period of time, we did the CBS convention, which was very important. CBS, records.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of big people were there. And all of a sudden, they started pouring money into Meatloaf's album to get on the radio. And the phones lit up. And the next thing you know, we went from, just playing smaller places and theaters and things to arenas, you know. And that year was wild to go from nothing to headlining arenas and touring the world, you know. It was a long year, and there was a lot of it that was very hard for me, just emotionally. I believe, and I love Meatloaf, so this is not a slag, but he was definitely using something, and he was just very, what mood is he going to be in? You know what I mean? Look out. My brother wasn't afraid of him, but I was, you know what I mean? And and by the way, of course, years later, I always had a great relationship with him, and it was so sad when he passed away. But it was a great experience for me because that would kind of get me ready for Kiss, you know? Doing arena tours is different, and it's wonderful, and yet it's very hard, and it's a different kind of pressure, and it's different things that you have to deal with. But I will admit, I'm really glad I got that under my belt before I got the call to join Kiss, you know. And I'm very aware that Meatloaf is just worldwide super famous, and especially in England, you know.
Yes.
Um, Although it came up recently, I had lunch with a guy here in Vegas who knows a lot of musicians, and he's in a completely different industry, food and beverage, but loves Meatloaf. And there was another guy that I met, and I started sharing Meatloaf stories and sending photos. And then he's good friends with one of Meat's daughters, Pearl a Day, who I know and I've met, and he just had a birthday recently too, Meatloaf. So everybody was talking about Meatloaf. So I just hope that album, that music, and the legend of Meatloaf carries on forever. I do. And my one regret was that the band that I performed with, which was that original Bat Out of Hell tour, that we never got a chance to do that one more time. Now, he
Yeah.
went out many times with talented players, good foils as the singer, you know, but we had Carlo DeVito, and Steinman was performing with us for at least, I think, the first half of the year. And I'll never forget, and the photos I have of that are precious to me. And many of my Kiss fans, they may not be a Meatloaf fan, but everyone knows Meatloaf, but they didn't know it. You know what I mean? I'm always sharing that. And it was an album that my wife Lisa, and we're very tight about everything, and she's a terrific singer, besides being my wife and a great cook and all the other things, an artist. But she grew up listening to that album, meant everything to her. And we have performed Two Out of Three Ain't Bad many times at some, you know, events when we do them, and she just kills it. And she says, "That's my favorite song." You know what I mean? So there's an interesting thread in my life that Meatloaf comes up a lot in interesting ways, for sure.
Fascinating stuff. I just want to quickly rewind to what you were saying earlier about deconstructing guitarists. So let's go back a little bit. Who were
Mhm.
your guitarist kind of inspirations when you were younger? Who did you listen to and say, I want to be a guitarist, I want to be like him, I want to learn to play like him?
Well, it started with the Beatles, but for me, that was the band, the music, the vibe,
Yeah.
the cultural changes that started to happen with the British invasion completely. But as soon as I heard Cream with Eric Clapton, I was like, oh my God, you know, my brother too. We were both affected by all the same guitarists. Jimi Hendrix, probably still my number one guitarist. Uh, Certainly Jimmy Page and what Zeppelin was doing, Led Zeppelin 1. It was just mind blowing to listen to this stuff. I did enjoy some of the progressive music, like from bands like Yes and King Crimson,
Okay.
but still Cream, which then there wouldn't have been a Mountain with Leslie West without Cream. You know what I mean? And there's not a lot of parallels for Jimmy Page, except later on you got bands like Van, you know the band I'm talking about,
Yeah.
Greta Van
Greta Van
Fleet. You
Fleet.
know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? You know what I mean? But I'm just talking about that era. I think they did a damn good job of channeling that music, which is so
Mhm.
special. Um, Jeff Beck, what a monster guitar player. So I delved into that, and I remember at times when I had a gig, but I was traveling, and maybe I had a residency gig with one of the disco artists I worked with, and I'm there for a week. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Oh, back then it was a cassette player, and I had my guitar. The cassette player is not going to play loud. It's just one of these little guys with a speaker in it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm studying Blow by Blow by Jeff Beck, trying to pick out the riffs, or a Hendrix record. You know what I mean? I didn't have the tools that I've had in the last 10 years. Now they have apps. You could slow things down. You can tune it to them so you're not struggling. I wish I had $1 for every fan that says, "How do you play Tears Are Falling? What key is it in?" Well, we used to monkey around with the vary speed when you're mixing and going to the master, and then, oh, let's pick up the tempo a little bit. Well, then it's out of tune with the guitar, but you don't care. But and then it's like we didn't play it in that key anyway, when we performed it live. So I'm always explaining it. But those guitar players changed my life. And there's so many more. I mean, when you move into later years, you have that Eddie Van Halen,
Of
who
course.
really
Yeah.
did love Clapton. And I had seen a video once where he could play Crossroads note for note, but he still sounded like Eddie Van Halen, but he had it down. So he incorporated that into his all those other techniques that he could do. Now, Randy Rhoads, who's so iconic, approached things differently. And I'm not sure who his influences were, but very influential in the 80s. But as soon as you got into later on, I admired a lot of the players, but none of them, inspired me the same way. So I'm always going back to if I'm flashy, like I needed to be with Kiss, it was whatever I could absorb from Eddie, but I couldn't play everything that he could play. So I just made it my own, and guys like that. But then I would incorporate, the Clapton stuff that I loved. People may not hear it, but I know it's there. The Jimmy Page stuff that I studied, the Hendrix stuff that I studied, even the Steve Howe stuff that I studied from Yes. So I love that I had a wide taste and appreciation of many guitar players. I studied jazz too, which came in a little handy when I needed to throw in a fancy chord inversion, for a song like the breakdown of God Gave Rock and Roll to You has some interesting chords. So that was all really in my toolkit of how to be an effective guitarist. So it's really helped my career, obviously.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Bruce. So wonderful to hear about all those sorts of things.
Mhm.
Obviously, after Meatloaf, we get Blue Jack and Michael Bolton
Blackjack,
and
blackjack.
Blackjack. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
I like that. I got to call it Blue Jack
Blue Jack
sometime.
from now on. That's it. We're sticking with that. But you mentioned Kiss a few times, so we'll go to Kiss. I
Yeah.
mean, so how did you join the band? How did they hear about you? How did you get the call?
So, even though, and like you said, I went from Meatloaf to working with Michael with this band called Blackjack, which didn't happen. Although that was a great experience too for me to go through, because now I am signed, I am in the band, kind of, you know what I mean? Where with Meatloaf, I'm a hired guy, you know what I mean, part of that group. And then I did a record with Billy Squire, which I wanted everyone to know, Tail of the Tape, okay, which is a terrific album right before it became really famous. But it's some people's favorite Billy Squire album, right? So I kicked around the East Coast in because I was still in New York and Queens, and I played with the Good Rats, which was kind of a strange band, right? So I was just struggling. Then I went back to Michael for a little bit, and then Billy Squire asked me to go on the road, and I still was supposed to do another thing with Michael, and it didn't happen. What I had to do with Michael, we didn't get the tour support, and Billy goes off and becomes really huge on the next record. Now I'm sitting on my ass, kind of without a really good gig, and wondering what's next. And then the phone rings, where it's Paul Stanley looking for ghost guitar work on Animalize. So this is summer of '84, right? Excuse me while I take a sip.
Of course.
Very dry in the desert,
You're rubbing it in
So
again. That's it.
now, yeah, exactly. So my brother, of course, ghosted on Alive 2, and was on the Paul Stanley record, and did some other tracks on Killers. It was very interesting that they bypassed Bob, went to me,
Mhm.
and I got a little taste of it. Paul says, "Don't cut your hair." It was about shoulder length, and I'm like, "Don't cut your hair." Yeah, what a ghost guitar thing is. You just come in and you do the session. You're not supposed to talk about it. You get paid, and that's it. Your name's not going to be on the record. That's called ghost guitar. And then I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks later, I get a call from the Kiss management, like, the guitar player's ill, Mark. I didn't ask questions about Mark when I got the gig, because I knew they used to sometimes, if they weren't happy with Ace, or Ace wasn't able to perform, call Bob, call Rick Derringer, call these other people. And the next thing I know, I'm rehearsing with them to go to Europe. And we just had a big anniversary of that.
I
Okay.
did, yes.
So 40 years on September 30th, and I played in Brighton, not
Yep.
too close to you, but closer than where I am.
Yeah.
And my knees were shaking. And I recently put up a short video just explaining and sharing a lot of images and my
Mhm.
thoughts of what it was like to suddenly just be a temporary member of the band, doing this high-powered set of exciting music, and thank God my chops were good. Mark was a very challenging player to imitate, and they did first show, we did 5 songs from Animalize. We cut that down to 3 pretty quickly. That was pretty typical of Kiss. You get ambitious, you try too many songs from the next record. They're not reacting. Well, of course, it's not part of the catalog yet, right? And then they started to drop them. But anyway, that tour, I really fit in well. Okay. I knew that they weren't hiring me yet, but I knew I had a chance. And I always just stay. Eric Singer always likes to use this expression. Yeah, I stayed in my lane. You know, you stay in your lane, you do your job,
Yep.
you do the best you can, and if you're going to get the opportunity, you know, if you try too hard, you might screw it up actually. So you just do the best you can, and you're respectful of everything. And then we came to America. They needed to give Mark a chance. He healed, okay, and they did. They let him try. We were both on the road in America together. It was very odd, and I kept it very kumbaya, you know. Oh, let's jam backstage. You know, we used to practice backstage and jam. And then they had him out for a while. I don't remember exactly how long until they started to try him in the show. And then they let him do one full show for sure. And that was the one that came out on the soundboard recordings from Kiss. Hmm. It had to have been the one full show with Mark St. John. Anyway, and then I think I had like the home team advantage. You guys have that in your sports too, right?
Yep.
And I already did the 6 weeks in Europe. I certainly was fitting them. I didn't step on toes and get in the way. And Mark tried very hard. He really did. I think he wanted to, in some ways. I don't think he was doing it intentionally be to make a negative shadow on him. But I knew those guys well enough that they wouldn't see it the way he wanted to, like,
Yeah.
you know, and I just don't think Paul and Gene liked it. And I don't think the tone was there compared to what I was doing for them. I don't think the how you connect on stage or how you look and fit and move with the band. And that's when they were able to make the decision to send them home. And that's when I remember, um, now I'm part of the band, you know, and I was an official member just in time for Kiss, the Animalized live recording, which was back then MTV was just, you know, starting out, and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff was a big
Yep.
deal. And it was a big deal. It still is a big deal. Unfortunately, it's out of print, but you know, it's out there and people watch it and there's versions of it. And I'm going to do a deep dive that I'll share on social media about that. And that's in December, actually, when we did it. So, wow, what a ride. And to think that now I'll be celebrating all these landmark, you
Yeah.
know, kind of events in my history, which is something I'm very proud of, even though it's a challenge sometimes, and I have to manage a lot of different things, you know, because you know, anytime you're in the entertainment business, there's a lot to handle. There just
Yeah.
is. But I'm so blessed with the connection to such an incredibly famous band, and the fact that the fans are still with them. And then all these years later, I have teenagers writing me on social media who just go out of their minds about, you know, the Asylum record or Revenge or whatever. So it's really a remarkable thing. Just is.
It is. It's incredible. And just chatting about staying in your lane and something that you said with that. I mean, when you're playing with a band like that and you've got so many classic hits to call on, I mean, how do you go about balancing that classic sound with bringing your own style to the group as well?
Well, that was the one really big difference between what they did in the reunion tour when Tommy Thayer, who's a friend of mine,
Mhm.
walked in when they realized that Ace wasn't going to show up. You know, basically, they didn't fire Ace. He just didn't show up. You know what I mean? Tommy, you got the gig. Um, they needed Ace to be the spaceman, and Tommy can play. They needed rather Tommy to be the spaceman, and as much as I missed being in the band, that would have been really awkward for me because I never had to play. I always had a good knack for playing signature riffs of other people, but still make it my own.
Yeah.
But if somebody really needed something to be very close, I could, like I did for Meatloaf, probably winding back to Bat Out of Hell. I would do my best Todd Rundgren riffs on that song. Um, but I was never given the edict by Gene and Paul, play Ace's solos exactly the same. Okay.
Okay.
So I had a little leverage there. I mean, leeway rather. And then, of course, I'm part of 8 albums that I'm contributing. Not all of those are all original, but you got Asylum, all original stuff. That's me. Crazy Nights, Hot in the Shade. Smash or Stretches, there's a couple new songs, okay? And then you got Revenge, right? And so then when it comes to MTV, all right, I'm doing what I did, you know, or what Ace did. And then, of course, Alive 3, I was able to be myself on some of the classic material, but recreate Unholy and the songs from my era. God gave rock and roll, let's say. But then Carnival Souls, another one where I'm totally just I'm me, whatever that is. Okay. That was a quick kissology there for everybody. There was a little bit on Animalized too. I did play, like I said, from the Ghost
Yeah.
Guitar. But again, it was never really demanded of me to play. So I was able to really be respectful of Aces. That's why Ace has always been so kind about my, history. And I was always his favorite other member, guitarist of Kiss. And I didn't have to shoot rockets and do things which was required of Tommy to be the spaceman in the reunion tour and beyond, as it was. So I'm very proud of how I interpreted his stuff. And I still learn though. I mean, there's times I go like, oh yeah, Ace did it over there. That's cool. Maybe I'll incorporate that. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
still look at those things and I'm still revisiting the catalog because there's so many songs and there's so many great songs. They're also not that simple. The people I remember making a quote on some interview, and next thing there was clickbait. Bruce says Kiss. If you think Kiss is easy, you're stupid. I mean, yeah, it's just it is complex. Some of the songs. Kiss doesn't get enough credit with the, kind of the snooty, more the people who just think that they're not elite music or something. Yeah, it started out as kind of a garage band. That's why Nirvana loved Kiss too, and all the grunge bands. But even the music from the early years, there's some really intricate things going on. I always admired Gene and Paul's songwriting, really, really great, and they knew how to find good co-writers if they needed it, or they'd
Yeah.
come up with something just by themselves that was brilliant. So you got to give them respect, even if you don't like Kiss.
Absolutely. And you mentioned songwriting there, and I've heard you say in the past that during your time with the band, it was a wonderful challenge writing music. Can you elaborate on that? Was it difficult? Was it fun? Was it challenging? How did you deal with Gene and Paul when you were coming up with music?
Yeah, I mean, always a bit of a strategy game in my mind, as to, well, you realize it's not only that you're going to generate money, maybe for forever, on a Kiss album, of course. I didn't co-write Forever. I wish I did. That was Michael Bolton there, the little connection there. But you know what I mean. You write a song, it's yours, and then you can then hand it down to your heirs. Okay. Um, but for me, it was also just that excitement of having my name as a co-writer with these iconic rock stars who wrote so many hits. So the pressure was on, and I'll never forget an Asylum going to Paul's apartment one time, or maybe both of the times that we worked on things. Desmond Child was there, who already wrote Heaven's on Fire and was involved in. That was a little right before. The big Bon Jovi hit, Living on a Prayer.
Yeah.
But I knew that, I'm sitting with a heavy hitter writer here. And yeah, I could see myself at Paul's place, just, you know, being like, this is surreal. I just have to be intuitive, be natural, contribute, stay in my lane. But there was no way that I would ever act like I know more than those guys. And it was great because I wound up with 4 co-writes on the Asylum record. So I'm so happy that they were willing to bring me in to contribute. Paul had a way that he likes to work, and if he's likes an idea, if he can make other parts his own or make that his own, he's in full tilt. If you present him too much, he might not like it because it doesn't feel like his.
Yeah.
And I respect that. Gene, I could present everything, maybe a title and all the music, meaning all the chords, not necessarily all the melody and the lyrics, and he'll jump right in. Hella High Water is a perfect example. Gave him the title, had all the chords, and he was able to write the song, and Gene was more liberal about that. Now here's another rub. And this one's the crazy one. So if I played it for Gene and if nothing happened with it, don't play it for Paul. It's not going to work. You know what I mean? Somehow he'll know,
Yeah.
and he's not going to want to do it. Okay. So now, how do you take these creations, your little babies, your little precious, moments of musical ideas, and decide which one goes to which one, with the fate being not being included on a record, you know? And there were times good stuff got left behind. I'll never forget in Revenge, something that just didn't click, didn't happen. And I remember playing it. I worked on it with my brother for one of his whatever band he was in then. I don't remember if it was Blackthorn or something else. And I remember I was playing it in the car, and Bob Ezrin came out of the studio, and he heard it. He said, like, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, it was a riff. I showed it to Paul or something, Huh. It was way too late. We were already, we had our songs, but that happens. Or Desmond, Paul, and I write this terrific song called Sword and Stone. And Ron Nevison, the producer, who was given the power to choose the songs, didn't hear it. So then the song gets covered by Paul Dean from Loverboy, Bonfire over in, Germany, whatever. You know what I'm saying? All of a
Yeah.
sudden, and it's a Desmond Child, Paul Stanley co-write, you know what I mean? But Kiss never did it, mind-boggling. But that happens, what are you going to do? I'm still grateful for the co-writes I have. And, every band has there are different dynamics,
Yeah, of
okay?
course.
It was much more natural with the band Union with John Corabi and I. You got to remember, Gene and Paul compete, so then I have the equal access because I'm in the band and I'm their guitar player, and I got to follow their instructions when I perform on it. I'm given this blessed opportunity to contribute, but then how do I split it up to who? Another one to deal with these with being in a band with that dynamic. They have a disagreement about something, right? One's black, it's black and white. One thinks one way, the other one. Bruce, what do you think? Oh my God.
Putting you in the middle.
Yeah. That's like, all right, which parent do I agree with? And what's the repercussions? Well, I see it both ways, guys. You know what I mean? It was just brutal.
Sit on the fence. Yeah.
Don't do that to me. That it's a no-win situation. Sometimes that's a way to just maybe I'll say one thing to soften the other person, even though I didn't commit. Do you know what I mean? It's a negotiation between the two of them. Unbelievable. But those dynamics are in bands, and I wish I was a fly on the wall for, with Queen or Aerosmith when they're going through the stuff when you got all these creative people. But generally, every band has two dominant people, and probably the best known group that we know a lot of the ups and downs were the Beatles, because then you had George Harrison, who didn't get a lot of shots at the songwriting towards the end of their years together as a band, proving what he could write with a song like Something and While My Guitar Gently Weeps and stuff like that, and brings in Eric Clapton to do it. So it showed his genius. And but we know there's always drama.
There is always drama.
Yeah.
Talking about an album that doesn't get mentioned very often, it was a departure for the band as well, Carnival of Souls. It was definitely darker than the typical Kiss
Yes.
recordings and things. So obviously at this point, grunge was big, alternative rock was massive as
Yep.
well. What do you remember of that period from the writing, the recording? What were your thoughts behind the sound and the direction that it took?
Well, Revenge should have done much better, but obviously the musical tastes were changing when
Yeah.
the grunge came in, and it kind of killed hair metal in a big way. And I know there's been articles and radio shows and everything about that discussion, and it's a valid discussion. But I see music that it goes in cycles. Okay, so it wasn't like that those bands didn't have good music. It's just this kind of change of the guard of every generation, and that's why Star Wars for a while just went away, and then all of a sudden it resurrected itself, right? And comes back even bigger. And I see that analogy even with Kiss going back to makeup, even though the band, especially all the music with Eric Carr and I was solid, and then with Eric Singer, we were firing on all four cylinders, but that desire for that, it was already that 10 years since, 12 years since.
Yeah.
So Gene was very attracted to the dark kind of edgy stuff. He didn't like the flannel shirts and you look like you work at the gas station. He didn't like that. But he heard Radiohead's Creep. I'm a creep. That kills me. And then he would hear the angst and the strength of a Nirvana song that just knew how to connect with people. And the next thing you know, I'm tuning down a little. I'm listening to Alice in Chains, and I'm going, "Wow, there's some cool riffs here. Let me see what I can come up with." Eric Singer, myself, and Gene would jam ideas in a little studio in Hollywood. I still have the recordings of much of it. And it was wild. We were just kicking around things. And some of the riffs, there's early versions of us. Why would Gene write a song called Hate if he wasn't, kind of influenced by this darker thing,
Yeah.
which without him being the demon, I guess there was an attraction to, well, believe me, I thought the revenge look for Gene was really tough and cool. Okay. Unholy. Come on. You know what I mean? But it didn't take off. It should have been platinum, double platinum. It's a gold record, and that was a tragedy. So the band was kind of confused. Well, let's make a darker and meaner Kiss album. Paul got a bit disillusioned, didn't really care for that stuff that much. But when it was needed for him to come up with a riff, he writes Master and Slave, a lot of the riffs in that, and dialed it in. I co-write I did 9 songs I co-wrote, but that's just because I locked myself in my room, drum machine, guitars, ideas, vibes, and just recorded everything and brought them to both of them. Gene, we already worked on stuff. So then it was just, how can I warm Paul up to this kind of edgier, darker Kiss? And it worked. You know what I mean? He did respond to some. I know it's not, it's a record that he's not proud of. Yet for some fans, they love it. So he's entitled to that opinion, of course. But I look back at Carnival Souls, and I just wish it was mixed a little differently. But I'm still proud of it. And then I have my one vocal performance, "I Walk Alone," which was very prophetic at the time. But it's a record that got so screwed. I mean, we're starting it right after MTV Unplugged was filmed, mixing Unplugged to come out. They're already negotiating, unbeknownst to Eric Singer and myself, that they're getting these offers, and Ace and Peter are playing along, meaning they can get their signature and commitment, on their terms, obviously, because they're the ones that kept Kiss alive all these years. And I didn't even understand what, like sometimes there'd be these long phone calls that Gene and Paul would disappear with in the middle of, we're recording an album, you know what I mean? And it turned out that eventually they had to just share it with Eric and I, but I didn't know what was going on. And then, that Carnival Souls was put on the shelf because they were going out with the reunion tour, which I knew was going to be huge. And Eric and I knew it was like, oh boy. But I knew the record would come out. Paul told me, and business-wise, it had to. The record company paid a lot of money for that, all right? And as much as maybe Ace and Peter didn't want to see that record coming out because they saw maybe more, and they had plans for Psycho Circus, which still completely turned into the Gene and Paul show. All the fans know that. I was even involved. I played bass on tracks and had a co-write. And I think Tommy Thayer played a lot of guitar in that already. So, but by the time Carnival of Souls came out, it was a little after the fact. But Jungle was a song that I wrote that was the radio track, and I was really proud of it. So it's the final sessions is a very interesting, kind of footnote for the Kiss catalog, but it's something that it was kind of what was happening culturally was affected, and then what was happening to the band as a business group, splitting to go off into and not being able to support the record or do a video for the record. But I still know that I love it that we did so many different, if I could use the word, colors of records. Some are poppier, so they're brighter. Some are darker, so they're more black. Every great artist has, all these different styles. I'm crazy about Frank Sinatra and every. Look, if you're a Beatle fan, do you listen to the early, oh, I love it, you know what I mean? Or do you listen to, let me take you down, 'cause I'm going. You know, you listen to a drugged out kind of vibe. It's a different thing. And Frank Sinatra had all these different kind of albums too that were from dark to moody to love to despair. So what can I say? Kiss has a varied catalog of terrific music, and I just so glad I got my stamp on quite a bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating insight. Thank you so much, Bruce. I mean, one last thing before we talk about you leaving the band. I mean, I hope you don't mind touching on Eric Carr. I heard you say in the past that you sometimes dream of him and you still have that connection. You feel him watching over you. I mean, that must have been a very difficult time for everyone involved with the band because obviously he was fighting for his life, wasn't he? And he was desperate to still be part of the
Yeah.
group as well. He still wanted to be in the band. So, how hard was that for everybody involved at that time?
It was, a tragedy, and obviously, with him being that young, in his early 40s and passing away at 41, uh, and the news just got worse and worse. We finished the Hot in the Shade tour. Usually, everybody just goes off to their own, lives for a bit before whatever we're going to do next. And I remember by March of the following year in '91, we had a conversation that I don't know, I have this chest infection, it won't go away. I got to get, I got to see the doctor, and then that goes into, oh, they think they see something. Now I got to have, exploratory surgery or something. And then all of a sudden they find that he had cancer on his heart, which is very rare, very dangerous. Okay. And it was a nightmare for everybody, and everybody had to deal with it in their own way. Uh, and then privately, I mean, I knew of a radiologist. I used to talk to him. I'm sure Paul talked to doctor people too, and they were like, that's like terrible. You know what I mean? This is not going to go well. That's what he said. And so as much as I always had hope, and when Eric was in remission, I was there as like, let's celebrate. This is wonderful. You're amazing. Let's do this. But I couldn't forget hearing that in my head that a specialist of those sorts would say it would probably come back. And that's what happened, of course, sadly. And we lost him because of it. And I'm so happy that he was involved to a certain extent on Revenge by doing the video of God Gave.
Yeah.
And I have this incredible recording of only the voices. I use it, I show it at clinics when I perform,
Oh,
where
wow.
you really hear Eric's voice in there, in that quiet part where everyone's singing gently, God gave rock and roll to you. What a tremendous artist. Now, I've stayed very positive. One other note before I get into everything else I did in honor of Eric was the fact that uh, we had to do Car Jam. The band decided, well, there's this drum solo from this riff that he worked on with Ace that was never really released. Let's bring this out, redo it. And I was the first one back to work after the funeral, which was actually therapy because everybody was shattered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just completely shattered. Um, the next thing I know, took a little while until you digest everything, and then years later, of course, the family. I used to work on this cartoon music with Eric and other songs that we hoped to be included on Kiss albums that they chose not to do, and we were able to put out a record called Rockology, which was his stuff. Great music, and some of it's just rougher, demo versions where he's just scatting and everything. And then there's been other things, and I've worked very hard with his sister Loretta on keeping his memory alive through some of these songs that he wrote. And there might be even more to come. We are always looking for ways to celebrate his life and career and his talent. So I've been certainly a part of his, continued legacy, shall I
Yeah.
say. Even on Union, there was a song called "Dear Friend," and it was written with lyrics for Eric. For losing him. I hear your thunder. It was about his drums and stuff like that. So he's so loved by the fans, and he deserves every bit of it. He was somewhat tortured on his own thing, but he was the most giving to the fans. And he had more talent than Gene and Paul allowed him to do, okay, which happens. But I know that Gene and Paul were very, very respectful of his musical contributions, his drumming, his vocals, and how he can contribute. And occasionally he got involved with the songs. You know, we had a song called Little Caesar, which was like, connected to him. So he's just someone that I always carry him in my heart. I do, and I have a soft spot for him. And the fans know that he had a real impact in those years. And another unusual thing was the fact that yes, he was in makeup for a little while, and then of course I got to be with him without the makeup. So he's one of the that's unusual, obviously. Yeah, Vinny for a hot minute was both. You know what I mean? But it was just for a short period. Eric walked into the Elder actually, which is really crazy. But then Creatures of the Night, wow, you know what I mean? And Lick It Up, wow. So at least he got to show what a drum sound. Everybody wants that, right? Stuff like what Love It Loud sounds like and things like that. So what a great career he did have, but gone way too soon at 41. And Loretto waves the flag really hard, and he's collected everything. And you should see the amount of photos. Loretto and I have been very cool with helping to archive everything together because it's safer that way. I'm always telling anyone out there watching, back up, back up, back up. You got family pictures, scan them, get all your family members to get them. You know what I mean? Because if you lose them because God forbid a flood, a hurricane, or a natural disaster or whatever, or the house burns down, come on, what are you going to do? Then you only have your memories with these pictures or music or tapes or whatever they are. They can be protected and put in the cloud, shall I say, right? Put in the safe. Okay.
That's it.
So everything we find and anything that ever comes up from Eric, we see as gold. And I'm obviously always appreciative when someone shares a picture of me when I'm, like one of my first groups or something like that. I love it. So yeah, the memory of Eric lives on, thankfully.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing the special memories. Very
Mhm.
wonderful. In terms of leaving Kiss, then obviously you talked about a lot of the conversations that were going on in the background. When you were finally told, I mean, how did that hit you? Because you'd been with the band for such a long time. At this point, was it
Yeah,
12 years or so that you've been an official member? So at this stage, you're not in the group anymore. How do you kind of reconcile that in your head? How do you go about what do I do next?
right. Well, first of all, we know that, and I want to set the record straight. I wasn't really fired. I was just, there was a different business model that can earn them, so much more money. So I was let go, though I was asked, which I agreed to just say like I'm leaving the band because it didn't feel like I was fired anyway. And they paid me for a year while they were out on the road with Ace and Peter. That was more of an insurance policy in a sense, just in case, whatever. Why let me go if that whole thing imploded in 2 months, right? So Eric and I, we already knew when we saw the sold out Tiger Stadium, the writing was on the wall. Okay. So now, all right, I had a great run. I didn't do anything wrong.
Mhm.
This band had that history. The fact that I even got 12 years out of it. All right, Eric Singer at that time only had 5, but Eric played with so many great people. We knew he'd be fine. I knew I'd be fine, but I didn't know what I'd want to do. Okay. I know Paul felt like Bruce would be probably a good session guitar player. He could do sessions. But as much as I like doing that, once the opportunity to work with John Corabi and have a band called Union came up, even though we had every big challenge in the world, independent label, not much, in the sense of financial support. And we didn't get a lot of great opportunities to break us. Okay. But we made some great music. So what can I say? And that music lives on. But I had to look at it. Okay. I'm going from first class, limousines, roadies, and, to sharing a room, to driving in a minivan. All right. Um, I accepted it because I also knew that those perks only come, that comfort and that luxury only comes when you're in something really big. And by the way, I didn't make that really big thing. Gene and Paul did, okay, along with Ace and Peter, and then was able to sustain it, right? And that's why by the time Eric Singer needed to help out when Peter wasn't going to work out, right? Um, Now they're in private jets, and you know what I mean. It's even another level of rock stardom, shall I say, playing, tremendous things. But, again, now he's in makeup. He's the cat man, and if I was even offered that, which I technically wasn't, I probably would have had to not be, I wouldn't be acting or playing like anything I played back in the 80s, and I love that era and I represent that, or early 90s, which was important for so many fans. So
Yeah.
maybe I kept that a little purer, you know what I mean, by not being, diluting it. I don't think Eric did anything wrong. He's got so much history now with in the makeup with them playing, that I'm still trying to get him as comfortable as he could be back to where he was with me in the revenge thing. And we've been actually doing some just local things, playing for friends and stuff,
Oh,
because
cool.
he's such a tremendous talent and he's such a dear friend of mine. But clearly, leaving the band was a big adjustment for me. It truly was. But doing the music, having a partner like John who got thrown out of Motley Crue, we had some symmetry there. We both went through divorces at the time, breakups with our significant others, so we had lots to write about. And what can I say? I was still connected to Kiss, but I do feel I've been more valued as the former Kiss guitar player more in the past maybe 6 to 10 years than I was
Okay.
right immediately then.
Hmm.
You see, so but that's also like, remember earlier where I was talking about the cycles,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
so it comes around that the non-makeup years are well loved, and people do want to see more content and more product and more celebrations of it, and I'm there to help.
Especially now because of obviously the Kiss farewell tour and everything else. And were you asked to be involved with that, or were you disappointed not to be involved with that in the end when it came to the last ever live shows?
Well, I mean, and there was a lot of press about this. I was disappointed that I wasn't involved, but I didn't expect to be involved. I never
Okay.
got the vibe. I didn't know about the avatars. Okay. That was a very last minute where I only heard a little peep about something unusual happening on the last night. And then there it was, the beginning of God Gave Rock and Roll with my guitar blasting through the Madison Square Garden. And that's the future. So I know they missed an opportunity not celebrating in a bigger way history all the years, and I really wish they would have mentioned all the other players,
Mhm.
all the other very important, influential people in their career. But that was their show, their choice, not mine. I know the fans were as well. I got so much feedback that they didn't understand that, but it was truly the last show, and they are concentrating in a very big way in this next era of Kiss, which would be this avatar. Now with technology and what's could be being created and coming in 3 years from now or whatever, who knows how incredible that could be. I don't see it being anything other than the superhero, Kiss look in the costumes and the makeup, because I just don't know if they would bother with my era. That's a big question. There's a lot of questions that I
Mhm.
wonder about, but I could definitely see this being something that means something to them, and this company, Pop House, that bought them to introduce to the music world, to the entertainment world, and let's see what happens. I'm supportive of Kiss, and all those years they toured in makeup, it was still shining a light on me because it was still Kiss, you know what I mean? And I'm on all those records and I'm all part of their history. But where the Avatar thing is going and what importance it will have in the overall um, story of Kiss is not, it remains to be told. And I don't think anyone, my thing is don't bet against anything with those guys.
Oh yeah.
But then again, it could fail. We don't know, I hope not. I hope it becomes something entertaining for people, because there was something unbelievably magical that they created when they became the superhero band. I didn't think that they wanted to be, they knew they couldn't be Led Zeppelin. So they just, we're putting on makeup and we're going to be so outrageous. And that was their mantra, to be over the top and do it uniquely. And boy, did they strike gold. And I don't mean that only financially. I just mean there was something brilliant about that for Gene to become this demon thing, for Paul to be a star man, always wanting to be a Jimmy Page, and be a rock star. Ace just being he's spacey, so he's the space. And then you got, everyone loves Peter, and he's the Cat Man, and he sings. What a perfect four guys, which I always felt there was some symmetry with a different way to do the Beatles, you know, um, where you have four guys that they're all important and they're all identifiable by, and as you know, Paul Stanley's real name is not Paul. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fascinating stuff. And I did speak with Gene a couple of months ago, and I tried to push him on what was going on with the avatars. He was remaining very tight-lipped, but he did say it would be bigger and better than anything before. And for people who are doubters about that sort of thing, I've not seen it myself, but I've got friends that have seen the big ABBA show, the big ABBA avatar
Yeah.
thing that's happening
Yeah.
in London, and they all come away raving about it, saying how amazing it is. So, like you
Yes.
say, in a few years' time, it could be even better, and we don't know what's going to happen, but it's something to look
Yeah, and
forward
I
to.
know Paul's been working with them, and I know that they're working on this. Paul has said some more current things that it's really bigger and greater than we imagine, and don't, that's just a little taste of what it could be.
Yep.
I loved it because I heard my guitar playing. Yeah, they use "God Gave Rock and Roll," which is a terrific song. I sometimes get a little slack when I say it's one of it. I'm not saying it is necessarily my favorite Kiss song. That's I don't even want to say what's my favorite guitar, because I have a few that they're all so dear to me. But God Gave Rock and Roll was a great choice for that. It was. I just love that it was from Revenge, and I played guitar on it.
Absolutely. And from a UK perspective, and in terms of sales and chart positions and things like that, your period
Yeah,
with Crazy Nights was obviously the biggest album Kiss had here in the UK, and God Gave Rock and Roll to You was a huge single
exactly.
over here as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it
and a
was
quick
definitely a period.
side to Crazy Nights was I love Brian May. He's another guitar player. Queen came a little later for me, but oh my God, and everyone knows he's just incredible. Eric Singer, used to gig with him, okay? And Brian's such a gentleman too. It was such a pleasure anytime I've ever met that man. I love him. And the only thing he knew from Kiss was Crazy Nights. Yeah,
There
I
you
mean, I
go.
can understand that. He's not living, in a way you live in a bubble when you're part of something as huge as Queen, which is total rock royalty, not just from the title, that, but he knew my solo in Crazy Nights. He knew it was me, and that's a thrill. So yes, Crazy Nights wasn't as big in America. It was big, but in the UK, certainly.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on to another huge band, Grand Funk Railroad, iconic band all the way back to the end of the 60s when they first kicked up and started making a lot of noise. You joined the group early 2000s. Mark had
Right.
left at this point. Don and Mel brought you into the group. So give us a little background on how you became part of Grand Funk Railroad.
Well, they did a reunion in '98, which got a lot of attention. And I remember I was excited and I was watching it. And they did a symphony show called Bosnia. It was something that when Bosnia, I don't know, raised money for Bosnia. It was at the Greek Theater. It had a lot of famous guests because Grand Funk's a band that should be much more famous
Yes.
and should be in the Hall of Fame. And somehow and it might have been their Detroit attitude, they didn't care, and the critics always hated them, and yet they sold out Shea Stadium, you know what I mean? But I knew Don previously. I toured with Michael Bolton, and we opened up for Bob Seger, and that was one of the tours where Seger was using Don Brewer on drums. And he's a rock legend, great drummer. Eric just he goes crazy. We're gonna go see them in a few weeks here. He loves them, and I was always cordial with Don. I knew also the woman he married. I remember from the East Coast, was friends with some people that I played with, so we knew how to keep in touch. And then after that, reunion for them didn't last the 22 years or 24 years like Kiss, ended after maybe 2 years. Don and Mel needed to figure out what to do, and I think it took them a little time. And I actually think it was a friend of theirs that worked for a drum company that we know a singer, and it was this guy Max Carl, who's a tremendous singer and a commanding presence, 6'5", blue-eyed soul, great singer, can play guitar, play piano, do all that. get him in the band and you got the band. But Max wasn't like, fancy lead guitar player. Okay. So now I'm on the short list and they reach out to me. And I remember the first call was to Larry Mazer, who managed Kiss, that I, still kept in touch with. He was the guy that actually told me to hook up with John Corabi and see if you can put a band together because he loved John. And the next thing I know, I said to Larry, what do you think? Should I like go audition to be in Grand Funk? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Do it. You know what I mean? So next thing I know, I'm rehearsing up in northern Michigan, checking everybody out. Funny story, Max looked me up. Max being a really talented guy, not a rock and roll guy, even though he sang backgrounds on Motley Crue records and things like that as a session player. But he's seeing me, pictures of me with Karabi backstage at a union show where strippers were there as part of the promoter to do a special like promotion. And he was like, he tells Don, I don't know if I want to work with that guy. He told me this later, obviously. I want to meet him before I'm gonna make a decision. And then I go to his home and he sees that I'm just like not that guy he saw in the picture. That's why, and that's why you want to pose, with a half naked woman. If someone doesn't know you, they might think that that's you 24/7. You don't know. Anyway, bunch of really quality people. We got a keyboard player from North Carolina who I'm still very good friends with, and I keep in touch with all of them. But Tim, tremendous singer, keyboard player. Now we're rehearsing, and all of a sudden we're going out there and gigging. Now these weren't typical tour; these were all those fly dates where you constantly go out. And outside for the downtime during the pandemic, when the whole world shut down, okay, 23 years I did that, flying and performing Grand Funk music. Okay. We eventually got in the last kind of 8 years or so a set that really worked a little bit of all the hits and then a couple of new things that Max and Don came up with and something that Max had a hit with. I got to showboat with Star Spangled Banner, which when Don heard at some gig we did at a Memorial Day weekend kind of festival, do you know how to do the Star Spangled Banner? The guy was asking. I'm like, yeah, I used to do that with Kiss. Don didn't know anything about Kiss. I mean, he knew Kiss, but these guys were not Kiss fans.
Different
It was
worlds.
so ironic. Yeah. Right. I'm like, yeah, I could do the Star Spangled Banner. You know what I mean? And then that became part of the show. You know what I mean? So, but I was never introduced as former Kiss guitar player. You know what I mean? It was Bruce Kulick. Okay. And I know the last couple of years, once the pandemic happened, I got so creative at home and I loved it. And what was I celebrating? My legacy, my life, my career. And the reaction from the fans was just so amazing.
Yeah.
And then I saw that people really do want to celebrate that. They want to hear more of what I've accomplished and what I want to do and share all this. So the last couple of years past the pandemic got really wearing on me. Not the music, not playing with them. We all got along. It was just like, I'm killing myself with the flights and the hotels and the travel every weekend, and I'm not celebrating my legacy. So last October, I told Don, I told him I'd leave at the end of the year. They have a dear friend of mine and Don's, who's now playing guitar with them, Mark Chatfield. Okay, and Chatfield was the guitar player with Bob Seger when I first met Don Brewer. I mean, it's like an interesting symmetry there. And that was like 40 years, that was 83 we did that, so yeah, do the math. It's crazy. So Mark's having a hell of a time. He loved Grand Funk. He learned the way I was doing Grand Funk, but he loves Foreigner. So he was able to make it his own, and that's what he's done now. So they're still out there doing it. They're working really well, and I'm so proud of them. And like I said, it was a time for me to just concentrate on me. And Don got it. I had the worst travels because I'm West Coast and most of the gigs are Midwest and East Coast. And, but I keep in touch. I still dream about gigs with them. It's pretty funny. You know what I mean? But still that band, should be more famous. And, but I always did enjoy playing the music.
Yeah.
And I know when I talk with friends of mine, musician friends, and some people are equally impressed or more impressed when I said, no, I played with Grand Funk Railroad. you know what I mean? Than if I said Kiss. Okay, so I always wish them the best, and I really wish they were inducted in the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
They deserve it.
Yeah, 100%. So like you said, you left to concentrate on yourself and your own creativity. So
Yeah,
give us a rundown. What have you been doing this year then? So I know you do a lot on social media. You do an awful lot on social media and you keep the fans
sure.
involved there. So tell us what you've been doing this past, what, 10 months or so?
Yeah. Well, I always did want to work on a book, okay?
Yeah.
And I was able to make, again, everything's going to be baby steps, but I did make some progress where I've been transcribing tapes that I were done many years ago by a dear friend of mine, and I want to write it myself. I want it to be an autobiography, and some of the tapes are people who passed away, like my parents and my brother. There's some stuff from Michael James Jackson, though he didn't really work with me, but he's still talking about Kiss stuff that could spark a memory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And these interviews are part of it. I've made massive notes on subjects, great stories. Fortunately, everything I heard while I was transferring and checking to make sure that they're all digitizing properly. Fortunately, I'd hear a story. I go like, I still knew that. I've told my wife that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm positive there'll be some little things that I might not have thought of. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's one source. But I also have my old website where I used to do rewinds of all the albums and I shared information. And I always left off the Asylum record because it was my first Kiss album where I was the new guitarist. But there's so much I could talk about besides how I grew up, the music I loved, how I got in Kiss, what it was like. And there are certain things I have kept to myself. So I'd rather tell in the book. And I have been careful about my personal photos so that I'm hoping there could be a section in the book for that. But I'm still in the rough stages. But I have a vision of it. So you got to start with that dream. And then there's music I want to work on. I did write some things during the pandemic, and I still have them. They're still valid. I'm still finding more things. I'm still coming up with new ideas, but I need to concentrate on that. I'm looking at 2024 as where I'm kind of feeling my oats as to being home,
Yeah.
being able to be in control of what I wanted to do. I went to Finland to do some of the things that I used to do when I could find a little gap in the Grand Funk schedule, where I would do a gig and a couple of clinics. Uh, I don't want to go on tour with anybody. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be gone from home. I'm going to Mexico in November to do a couple of gigs. There's these autograph shows which have been very rewarding because I couldn't do them in many of those 23 years with Grand Funk. And now the fans love bringing their history book or their
Yeah.
favorite album and having me sign it and take a picture. It means the world to them. So that's been nice. And since my wife and I we got so active on social media. I used to perform with her. We did some cooking sites, which we're still getting involved with a little more now. I'm revisiting a lot of the things that I did in the pandemic, okay, that I couldn't do as much when I was traveling. So there's lots of things I like working on new products I can offer. Or just ordered some mini guitars. People love the mini guitars. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm taking the iconic Kiss guitars and making the mini guitar that they can have on their shelf. But another big thing that I've worked on that's taking me a very long time, and it's very exciting. There'll be some press about it soon. Is Kulick guitars, just some boutique instruments, okay? And the parts are from a company called AXN I've been working with. You see their logo there. This has been a learning curve. Like learning like, okay, if you have a raw body and a neck and then getting it painted, the parts. I have great luthiers locally, okay? And when I started working with this guy, Johnny from AXN, whose whole passion is 80s instruments, okay? Like the early ones, like my Flip Flop Blue, the Multi Swirl. We came up with an Asylum design one. But like I said, this boutique line of Kulick guitars is really just an homage to my Kiss years and what made, those kind of super strats that I had to perform with. Everybody knows Eddie Van Halen's, striped, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Kramer guitar, and then he made it his own. And I'm not looking at mass producing anything here. These things cost a lot of money, especially if it's made in America. But I think there's a connection between me and those kind of models. I'm still working with ESP guitars. I love that they introduced this line called the 1987. Okay.
Okay.
And that's a lot of the instruments that look like some of the other guitars that I also played. So there's some exciting stuff in 25 along those lines with something that they from their line. So I'm a guitar geek, but what I'm learning, can I just you see that Kulick on there, that
Yep.
decal? That's a pain in the ass, okay? That's a water slide, okay? And then to get them made, to get them done right, unfortunately, the local guy who helped me build this banana tribute guitar, and that's what this is, like to the one on Crazy Nights, okay? I like I said, now I'm learning about, all the little intricacies of the guitars that were my best friends that I created this stuff on. I also work with a t-shirt company that makes pillows, and they're with
Ah,
things like celebrating my guitars. There's the banana. You get what I mean? So it's so much to celebrate, so much to share. Certainly, there's new anniversaries coming out, okay, from Kiss, and that takes a lot of time. I like doing it myself. I sometimes have help from a talented videographer friend, and the one in December that will celebrate the Animalized Live, which was such a cool recording. Look for that, but my website always has content, and I'm looking to do a little bit of everything and just the things that turn me on, you know what I mean, that are related to my career and what I'm proud of, So it every day is exciting. I just did new photos with this guy that I met who saw me, and he grew up in Peru. This guy Simon did tremendous pictures, and it's just so every day there's something connected with Kiss, that's just um, enters my world, and if I can embrace it and in some way even kind of grow from it
mhm.
and share it, it's a win-win for everybody, and the stress, unfortunately, the harder parts for me about all of this, even though I'm free, I can do what I want, but I'm very driven. I'm so neurotic that way. So I'm pretty micromanaged, and if a company doesn't get back to me about something, I'm on them. Do you know what I mean? Because I know how easy it is to get, every day something goes on. I'm sure in this past week, something came up for you that was like, what? The plumbing's not working in that room? Or like yesterday, my garage door opener wasn't working right. You know what I mean? So this morning I'm dealing with that. But what I really want to do is, edit some of these new photos and then prepare even more for our interview. I was scrambling around right before we started because I remember our friend Gwen, who helped me set this up with
Yeah.
you, saying like, "You're going to talk about your 5 favorite albums." So I'm running around looking for them. I already know my list, So there's never a dull moment, as you can tell.
Fascinating. And what I loved and what I've taken from that last few minutes of you talking is the fact that you do own what you do now. You've got time to be yourself, to be your own creative self, to do what you
Right,
want to do after all these years of being in these bands and having the commitments and having the tour dates lined up, and you've got to be here at this time and this date and this,
right.
that, and the other. You now get to be what you want to be and do things the way you want to do them.
I mean, turning 70, everyone's got to look at it differently. For me, certainly if I was in the Bruce Kulick band, let's say, making as much money as Grand Funk, doesn't have to be Kiss money. I wouldn't retire. I wouldn't stop it because it's me, and I would love every minute of that. But I needed to stop the Grand Funk legacy because it wasn't me.
Hmm.
And it's hard work to travel like that. So I remember having a great conversation with Buck Dahmer I mean, rather really from one of the other VOC guys. I'm just having what's his name again? So anyway, Eric Bloom.
Eric Bloom,
And
yeah.
Eric is like, yeah, Buck wants to take it easy. I'm like, I respect that. Yeah, but I like working. Right. And we had this little conversation, and I'm like, now they're still working all the time. So I ran into him in January. I left Grand Funk. Oh, I said, it's not my legacy. He goes like, well, we stopped, and then we got offers we couldn't refuse. So they're back out there. Well, they're back out there because that is their legacy. They love it. Okay. So when you see these guys, Don Brewer doesn't want to stop until he literally collapses on the drums, I think. Okay. And God bless him for it. Why not? He still can sing great. He still plays great. And I say that to everybody out there. I didn't stop because I can't play anymore. I stopped because I want to just do me. And thank God I still got the chops and the things I post, I think you could hear it. I'm still playing and I still want to perform, but it's got to be stuff that turns me on and about me. So all those legacy bands that the original guys are still doing it and they're in their 70s and 80s, God bless them, and they should do that. But if that's just your job for you, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're not, if it isn't really yours, I couldn't imagine doing that at 75 necessarily. And fortunately, I've been, um, comfortable in my life, and I didn't go buy Lamborghinis and Corvettes every other year. So if I want to say I don't want to do anything at all, I could, but I do want to do a lot, and I'm actually very busy this year. You know what I mean? It's different,
Yeah.
but I'm just not, traveling every weekend for them. I'm just doing what I'm going to do. So it's been a fascinating journey, I have to admit.
It's been a fascinating journey and it's been a fascinating chat with you, Bruce. Thank you so much for your time. I've loved hearing your stories and best of luck for what comes ahead in 2025 as well.
Well, thank you. And just real quickly, Gwen said that I was going to be able to mention 5 records that I played on that were really cool. Okay.
Of course, yeah. I was going to do that separately. So,
I
um,
pulled them out. All right. So we can start that part whenever you want.
yeah, we'll
Okay.
do that now then. We'll do that as
Okay.
a separate point. Now, here we go. Because
And I'll give you a bye from the other thing. Great talking to you, Paul. This was a lot of fun. And I hope to see you again and come visit me in Las Vegas. Okay.
we'll do that. I'm on the next flight. There you go. Perfect, Bruce. That's brilliant. I'll just do a quick introduction then, and we'll chat
Mhm.
about your top 5 albums then. Okay.
Okay.
Just give us a quick sip of Pepsi. Other brands are available. Hey, I'm Paul from VRP Rocks, and I'm delighted to be bringing you another My Five favorite. Now, I love these My Five favorites because we get to speak to the rock stars themselves and we get to hear about their favorite things. Now, we often have our own projections. We think about what our favorite records are, what our favorite songs are, our favorite bands are, but we don't often get to hear from the rock stars themselves. And I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful guitarist with such a great history. And he's going to be revealing his 5 favorite albums. So, welcome to VRP Rocks. Bruce Kulick.
Hey, thanks a lot, Paul. It's
Yes.
always exciting. It's always very hard. I even had to look up my Wikipedia to make sure I knew, because I've done a lot of stuff and
Yeah.
there was a bit of a struggle picking 5. I mean, I could easily pick just 5 great ones of the Kiss years, but I'd rather, obviously, it should be for my whole career. And does it matter if it's chronological? We could do it that way.
We can do it any way you want, Bruce. You
Okay.
just you
Well,
just
let's go
you go.
chronological. I'm a kind of neat and tidy guy. It's easier that way. So I recorded with my like a band of friends in Queens back in 73 and 74. And we never had a name, but there were tapes, okay, that my dear friend Mike Katz and the drummer Guy Boys, who passed away a few years back, but we wanted to be the next Cream or progressive. Cream meets something progressive style. Mike was very, very talented with the songs. I was very challenged with the music. And then when years later, we revisited it and going like, what could we do with this? And somebody said, you got to put this out. This is too good. You know what I mean? And then I had a great engineer work on it. So we decided, well, we'll just call it KKB for Kulick Cats or Cats Kulick Boys, BOIS. And I did reissue it one more time, only because we found another song or rather we did a new song, and that was called 1974, called Got to Get Back. That's streaming, and that's on also because I kind of can control it to put it up on all that. The physical product, we just put out like 1,000. They sold out very quickly. But KKB, so there I am as a 21-year-old, right? Doing this progressive music where we're not punching in. This is us live being captured with a few overdubs, okay? And it just sounds incredible. It was done on an 8-track. Obviously, the new song we added was still done kind of primitive because just sharing files. He'll send me the drums and the bass, and then I overdub some guitars. But I'm real proud of the guitar playing and the music, and it's very unusual because it is a little bit of everything. Mike sang terrifically. Doesn't sound like any other groups that I've been involved with, but my guitar playing, every riff I played, and I could see my brain going while I'm playing the riffs on my SG, which I still have. Okay, I did sell it to friends of mine, and it finally got back to me years later. This magical SG special from 1965,
Oh,
and I
wow.
could hear the wah wah that I still have. You know what I mean? It's just what a remarkable timepiece for me. You know, it's kind of like the way Kiss, the fans know all about Wicked Lester album or stuff like that. Although this is much more rock, I think people would. And my one co-write is very Hendrixy. There's like a little weird Hendrixy thing about it, but it's something, you know. Like I said, all you got to do is put in Bruce Kulick KKB in any of the streaming things, or look online. Sometimes people are offering the CD. They're not cheap because they're out of print, but it's something I'm real proud of, you know. So check that out. All right. Now we'll go in order. So obviously I love a Billy Squier record I did. I talked about that one a little bit early in a different interview with you, but we got to jump to Kiss, okay? Because I'm not on the Meatloaf record, you know what I
No,
mean?
no, that's
Uh,
true.
so certainly at the Asylum record, Show and Tell, since I have some of the product here, was monumental because now I'm one of the faces on the cover of a Kiss
Yes.
album. You know what I mean? Even though I look like a pop art ghost of sorts, but this is such an iconic cover. It really is interesting. And what a great record. I had four co-writes, my guitar playing, you know, something to be proud of. Although some of it's very hard that I can't really do now. Some of it was, you know, we were combining tracks. You know what I mean? Oh, I switched to that one. I'm like, but I'd never be able to play that. We don't care. You know what I mean? Back then, everything had to be fast and furious. But some great songs like, you know, Tears Are Falling, All Night, King of the Mountain, still very important to many, many Kiss fans. So, and the fact that it started my history is very, very special. One funny side note: Eric Carr was never happy that his face got, you know, cut off a little bit. But the art director who's done interviews recently has mentioned that yeah, originally it was you know a very vertical thing, and then he realized much cooler just tilting it. And I guess I'm glad they tilted it that way so my chin could be shown. Okay,
Got to get the chin
as
in
much
there.
as poor Eric got cut out a little bit, but everybody knows his thunderous drums are all over that record. Okay, all right. Now, even though there's other Kiss albums, I'm gonna go to my next favorite, which is Revenge. Okay. Now, Revenge was a perfect record in many ways to me. Bob Ezrin, bringing him in the fold. I learned so much from him. The fact that, yes, we lost Eric Carr during this period, but he was able to be a part of the record with Car Jam 81.
Yeah.
But Unholy, we really set the tone for a powerful, powerful Kiss. The era with Eric Singer and myself could be, you know, kind of memorialized forever with this terrific record. Okay. And of course, the European version, because you couldn't use the other S's with the, you know, with those S's. Okay.
Yep.
For the German market. Okay. What a tough looking band, right? There you go. All right. So great record. Super proud of it. I learned so much from Ezrin too. And I loved my guitar playing. But honestly, a big part of it was also the fact that he wanted me to play from my balls. Okay, I didn't know what that
Yeah.
meant
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
but I just kind of thought every note had to count. Let me bring out some pedals that could be more colorful for the lead guitar playing. So it's a great record. All right. So next one, I don't have it here,
Can I just
but
stop
the
you before
band,
you go any
yeah,
further there? Just mention Bob Ezra in there and him
yes,
coaxing stuff out of you. I mean, how important in the studio when it comes to recording is the producer when it comes to stuff like that? Because some can be a bit wishy-washy, some can be overbearing. But in terms of
right,
getting the finished product and getting the album absolutely right, a quality producer and as you mentioned there, Bob Ezrin, got something out of you that sometimes
yeah.
you don't think you can do yourself. So how important is it to have a proper good producer with you when you're doing things like that?
It's extremely valuable, and that's why I always rave about Bob. And as much as he's a mad professor, and at times he tortured me, he was incredibly creative with the contributions. Now, other records where it was more produced by Gene and Paul, at times Paul or Gene would contribute ideas about the solos. That everybody should have a voice in the studio, and the songwriter clearly should be very vocal if he
Yeah.
can. But Nevison wasn't as uh, you know, picky about what to play. He knew when he had something, but Bob could create it with you. Okay, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So And just remember, Bob Ezrin's the guy who came up with "Everyone Loves Detroit Rock City." Ba da 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 da. I'm playing it like that because it's almost like a trumpet part. You know what I mean? So his talent was undeniable and so important, and it was something I've learned that I've been able to. A lot of the techniques and things that he taught me and worked with me, I've shared with other bands, okay,
Yeah.
or other songwriters when I'm helping them arrange music. So those experiences in Kiss, much more valuable in ways to me than just that the joy of performing on stage. Of
Yeah.
course, that's a thrill of a lifetime and connecting with your crowd. But when you're learning, I remember Billy Squire had a little book. He'd make
Oh,
notes.
really?
And that became like, whoa. Well, Billy's records were nothing to slouch at either, right? Great sounding albums. And I learned from everybody. I learned from Nevison as well. Um, yeah, you always should watch and learn when you're in that situation, when you're around these people with a proven track record. They didn't just, I mean, some people are famous for something that's silly that you don't need to learn from. Maybe the guys from Jackass or something, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to learn how to jump into a pool, with, from the top of your building. But certainly, these people are super talented, and you want to study them, and then go on from that. So
Yeah.
it is great to have a talented producer. Absolutely. All right, so I'll move on. And here's an album that we did have a producer that was very, very helpful too. And his name was Bob Marlette. He worked with quite a few metal bands, but he did the second Union album
Okay.
called The Blue Room. Okay. And I didn't love a lot of his, he had a great relationship with John. I didn't really get to know him as a person, but he was very talented though. And he knew how to help us arrange the material. And I did love the sound of that record. He was very quick at it. He knew how to add some strings, and we didn't have to hire a quartet. He had great samples, and he did a terrific job on the Blue Room. And I thought that record, by then we were still struggling. Union was the band that hoped to make it big and didn't. But the Blue Room's a great record that I would hope everyone could check out, and that is out there on streaming. Getting copies, or actually, that CD is available from my website because I always had extra copies. Even though we were with these independent labels,
Yeah.
most of the time they went out of business. You know what I mean? So it'd be like, oh, well, since you can't pay me for the songwriting, can I have some copies? Please. All right. All right. So then the last one, where is it? Come here. Okay. I'm just showing you one of the deluxe vinyl versions. Is my solo record BK3. Okay. This was like this super deluxe version that we offered. There's so many great performers on this record with me, and I really it still stands up. Gene co-wrote and sang a song. His son Nick co-wrote and sang a song. Karabi's on there. Okay, I have Steve Lukather from
Oh, wow.
Toto, tremendous guitar player. We do an instrumental on that. Then the last known recording with Doug Feiger from the
Oh, the
Knack.
Knack. Yeah.
Okay, he sang a song called "Dirty Girl," and the Europeans all know Tobias Sammet, from Avantasia.
Advantage. Yeah. Yeah.
What a tremendous, singer and co-writer, and Eric Singer. Okay, playing drums on that song. So I sang a few of the tunes, but it's just a record that I think is beautifully packaged. I had the guy who still does all the Kiss deluxe ones do the artwork with me. This guy Tom German and Neil Zozow did the photo shoot. So very proud of this record, and it's still out there. But this one you can listen to. Though I did want to make a footnote: if you're in Europe, because I licensed it outside of North America to a label, they don't seem to care about streaming, so they don't put it up. So
All right.
people will write me from Norway or something. Why isn't PK3 on? And I'm like, yeah, well, you're asking the wrong person. I don't control it, sadly. Okay. So, but the record's there. I offer it on my, meaning you can find CDs, and I offer that on my website. The albums go for a lot of money. They were always sold out quickly when I did special runs of that. And the other two solo records I did, which we didn't get a chance to talk about before, Audio Dog and Transformer. Audio Dog came out on vinyl, sold out immediately, and I hope to get Transformer out as well. So this is why I need to do another solo record, because this one came out, and believe it or not, in 2010, which is kind of
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
So to think
Long
that
time
it's
ago.
taken me all that time, maybe the 15 years will be the charm, and I can come out with something in 2025. Because as much as I could do another band album, I'd rather do my own. It would be
Yeah.
just make it more flexible for me to bring in whoever I need. Though I know a lot of my go-to people would be the people like I performed with on the Kiss cruises, who are still dear friends of mine. But I'm sure I'd love Eric to play on something, and other people that I'm good friends with. So there's many more I love, but if I had to pick five, there's my five.
Fascinating five as well, and some interesting music for people to look into as well. Like you said, the
Yes.
the KKB thing, that's something that's kind of gone underground, and people can definitely check that out. And
Yep.
obviously the third record, if someone can get hold of a copy of that, because especially over
Mhm.
here in Europe, it'd be interesting to get a copy of that. Thank you so much for those choices, and it's nice to see such a nice variation and some of the stories behind it as well, Bruce. So thank you
No
so much for
problem.
your time.
Thanks again, Paul. Okay. All right. You be well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. That was
Okay.
wonderful.
Okay. And
Lovely.
whenever you post these, if you can make a mention of my website too,
Yeah.
because that always explains everything, and my YouTube channel has stuff on it too, but they can find all that from the website. Okay.
Yeah.
All
No
right.
worries at
Wow. An
all.
hour and a half with you.
I
Who
know.
knew?
I'm so sorry for taking all your time.
No, no. You seem like a quality person, and I'm always curious to see what clickbait they'll pull out of this
Oh,
interview. But
I know.
I don't think I said anything too ridiculous, right? We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well,
Definitely.
thanks again.
Thanks so much for your
You take
time.
care, Paul.
Cheers now.
Okay. Bye bye
Bye.
now.